So now we come back to the Godzilla of printing desktop calculators, the Monroe UltimateX. It has a whole bunch of features that I think are literally incomparable. There aren't desktop printing calculators that have comparable features to many of these. You access most of them via the define key down there. You press it twice. It comes up with setup, and then you press a key or a key combination to enable one of the modes for these other computations. So, and in terms of what they are, there's a sticker on top there that shows them. These, in this table here, if you press define dot one, then it gives you the finance functions, and it reassigns the 5 keys across the top there from their normal values of up arrow, down arrow, replace, insert, and reprint. There's the labels for those 5. And it reassigns them to a new set of functions. So define dot one reassigns up arrow to future value. Well, it reassigns them to finance, a finance application. The up arrow becomes future value, down arrow becomes present value, the replace key becomes rate, insert becomes term, and reprint becomes payment. And we talked about that for going through the finance calculations. We talked about currency conversion. There are other functions that you can do, which I will very briefly talk about, at least some of them. VAT tax, you can set 5 different tax rates. You can also set discount tax, 5 different discount taxes. Those do a slightly different calculation. I believe the VAT tax is what you would normally think of as a sales tax in the US. The discount tax, honestly, I can't remember exactly what that is. The time card stuff is for doing addition and subtraction of time values. I think I showed that already. Start and elapsed time, number of days, and decimal equivalent converts between number of days and a decimal, or number of hours and a decimal. Profit margin, that we talked about that. This is for setting up for cost cell margin. Of course, there are 2 other keys there, so it assigned 1 over x and delta percent if you do that. Okay, one of the other ones, let me just zoom out. We've talked about the independent memory that all the calculators have. On the Monroe, they're labeled I star, I diamond, I plus, I minus. On most of the others, it's M star. And on the Monroe UltimateX, it actually has the ability to have a second independent memory. That's the memory 2 here. And those keys become M star, M diamond, plus, minus, and oh, right, and then that's those 4. So now what are you going to do with the other key? Well, they've done this RV, which is reverse values. For that, I think I remember this correctly. So we'll set that up with .9. Let's give it a try. I'll zoom out. We will do define .9. And now, as I recall, that swaps the arguments. So if we do 6 divided by 3 and realize, oops, we really meant 3 divided by 6, we can press that RV key. It will swap those values, and now it's 3 divided by 6 equals, and that's 1/2. Yeah, so that's what that does. It basically swaps the arguments. Of course, when you enter 3 divided by, it has to remember that 3 somewhere. And then you enter 6. Now it's got the 6 in the display register. The 3 is in the pending operation, in what I would call the pending register. So it basically swaps the display register with the pending register. Okay, there are also, let me zoom out again so you can see where I'm looking. There's also on that sticker, there's another set of definable functions up here. They don't affect those 5 soft keys across the top, but they sort of set a mode for the calculator that will cause it to behave a little bit differently. And those are, if you can read them, sum of x, sum of t, running, subtotal, print, etc., etc., etc. All of these are covered in the manual, all of them with examples, and I will give a few of them. The most important one here actually is the clear all functions. So if you find that the calculator is behaving strangely, there's a good chance that you've mistakenly or enabled one of those modes or functions, and you can clear all of them by doing define clear. You can also print out the ones that are currently in use by doing define 9. And that prints out the full set of possible functions that you can define. If they're in red, it means that they're not enabled. And of course, I just did the define clear, so none of them are enabled. Okay, let's give an example of these functions that it can do. One of them is it will sum the first factor of a multiplication or a division into the independent memory. So to set that up, we'll do define 1. That sets it up. And now, what I mean there is if you do, say, 3 times 2, we'll do an equals plus, so that will put the result 3 times 2 into the accumulator, but it will also put the 3 into the independent memory. So if we recall the independent memory now, there's a 3 there. If we then do 9 times 45 equals plus, and recall that independent memory, the 12 is there now. It added the 9 that we entered to 3. Let's do one more. Let's do 10 times 2. It will take the 10 and also add that to the independent memory. So we'll do 10 times 2. We'll do an equals plus, and recall the memory, and the memory is 22. It added the 10 to it. I guess there's a reason to use this. I don't need it, but I suppose some people do. Another one that's really handy, and if I were using this constantly, I would probably set it up immediately. I will show this. Here, let me just zoom in on the printout. And I'm just going to press the clear key. Press it again. I'm sorry. I'm going to press the star key to clear the accumulator. Recall and clear the accumulator. It recalls and clears the accumulator and advances the paper 4 lines. The reason for that is to get it up out of the way of the window, and so it's ready for you to just tear that off. Well, that's real handy if you're doing calculations and constantly tearing them off, but if you're doing like a few things divided by 6 equals, and we're going to add that, and we're going to add another one, and then we'll see what we got for a total there, and then we'll do something else. We'll do 12, add, and we'll do 89, subtract, we'll take the total of that, and boy, that's a lot of paper that it's going through. So what you can use for that is define advance. And what that does is set up the paper saver mode. Now, when you recall the accumulator, it will put 1 blank space in there, but really for everything else, you're not going to get anything. Okay, so with paper saver mode on, let's do 12 times 3 equals, and then do 4 times 6 equals, and it didn't put any blank spaces in there at all. Okay, now let's try turning that off. I'm going to do define paper advance again. If you really, when you do one of these define modes, you're not setting it, you're toggling it. So if it was off, it turns on. If it was on, it turns off. So define paper advance was already on. I did define advance again, and that turns it off. And you can see that on the printout because it printed SA, I guess that's the closest it could get to paper advance, and it put it in red. So paper advance is now off, and I'm going to redo that calculation that I did before. 12 times 3 equals, and then we're going to do 4 times 6 equals. And if I advance the paper, you'll see, just as an example, without paper advance mode, it prints a blank line between after and equals. It prints a blank line. So without paper saver mode. Paper saver mode is great to save paper, and But if you want to have plenty of space, then you might want to turn it off. Okay, another option that's kind of interesting is to print a running subtotal. So we've got this set up. Let's do define 3. That's how you set that up. And now when we start adding numbers, 12 add, 23 add, 45 add, 69 add, it printed on the page after each of those, it printed the running subtotal. Hey, if you want it, there it is. Another little feature of the UltimateX, when you're adding numbers here, we'll do 12 plus 52 add. Every time you press add, it shows the subtotal over there. That is actually settable with that slider switch right there. If you slide that from the diamond, which reminds you of a subtotal, to the central position where there's just a square, and we'll zoom out. Again, let's clear the accumulator. Now, as you're adding numbers, it keeps the number that you just entered, rather than the subtotal. I actually like that because it makes it a little easier in case you think you've entered the wrong number. You just glance into the display to see if you got it right. Another interesting feature is two-column addition. With two-column addition, you can add things to the accumulator the way you normally do, but if you use the equals plus and equals minus keys, it will store the value into the grand total register, and it will print and display it on the left-hand side. We'll set that up with define 4. Actually, let's do define clear, define paper save, define advanced to set up the paper saver mode, and now we'll do define 4 to set up two-column printing. Now, let's add 12 to the accumulator, and 3 more to the accumulator, and then let's add 45 to the grand total. We'll do 45 and do equals plus. We'll add another 58 to the grand total, and finally let's add 63 to the accumulator. Now, to get those totals, we'll press star, which will give us the total in the accumulator of 78. Press it again, and it'll give us the total in the grand total register, which is 103. So if we bring this in, hopefully you'll be able to see it there. So what we did was 12 plus 3 plus 63, and that total was 78. We also did 45 with an equals plus, 58 with an equals plus, and those add up to 103. We got that again by pressing the star key twice. Another funky feature is automatically summing to memory 1 for the equals or percent keys. So let's do a define clear to clear the settings, define advance to set paper advance mode, and the sum to memory 1 is define 8. So now we'll add 22 to the accumulator, and then let's do 2 times 3, we'll press equals, and that, you can see the memory is now got something in it. That will take that 6 and add it to the independent memory. If we take a look and recall that, it's 6. Let's do 3 times 9 equals 27, and it has added the 27 to the independent memory, so the independent memory now contains 33. Meanwhile, the accumulator still just contains the 22 that we had in it. The time card feature on the Monroe UltimateX is fairly complex since it's probably not going to be used a lot. I don't think I'll go into it. You enable it with define.5. It changes the keys across here to start and elapsed time, number of days, and decimal equivalent. After that, you can enter numbers in hours and minutes. You can enter a start time and an end time, and it'll compute the amount of time in between the two, add them all up, convert back and forth to a decimal equivalent of the hours and minutes, stuff like that. Finally, there's a spreadsheet function. Again, I'm not going to go into that. It's pretty crazy. It basically lets you turn this thing into a spreadsheet. It will remember a whole bunch of rows and columns. Something tells me it was up to 100 rows and columns. It redefines the top keys to navigate around the rows and columns, and then it lets you add up rows and columns independently, print out what's been added up. Yeah, basically have it work like a basic spreadsheet where it will add rows and columns together. It seems great. Certainly running that on a PC or a Mac would probably be easier. The advantage, I guess, of using the Monroe is that fabulous keyboard.